The courtyard smelled of cedar pitch and iron polish, the ceremonial rings slicked in moon silver as banners breathed in the night. I stood barefoot at the stone altar, palms damp, the mark at my throat shimmering like a patient star. Naira of obsidian talon, the elder intoned, staff striking 3 clean heartbeats. I stepped forward, wolf steady and bright inside my ribs. Across from me waited Cashin, the pack's golden beta, the boy who'd sworn me forever under a blood-red dawn and kissed the ash from my fingers after training. His gaze slipped past me like winter glass. Cashin of obsidian talon, the elder called. Take your mate and seal the bond. I braced for heat, for teeth, for the last piece of myself to click into place. I refuse, he said. The words landed like claws. Laughter died, silk hissed. Someone dropped a goblet, and wine bled across white stone. The moon chose wrong, he added calmly, as if reciting a rule. I won't tie my bloodline to an omega. My wolf flinched hard. Don't, I whispered. We were fated. No, he said, eyes cool and righteous. We were convenient. The elder's voice wavered. By will, the bond is cut. Light burned through me, white, clean, merciless, and then the mark at my throat guttered out. I fell to my knees, the world suddenly too loud, too bright, too cruel. Cashin turned his back and the drums went silent, and every stone that had just held our future held only my breath. The moon's chosen became the pack's lesson. I rose without a sound, gathered what dignity survived, and walked out before dawn, an omega with a hollow where a promise used to be. Frost took the path first, then the wind. Pines closed behind me like a gate the pack didn't bother to lock. I left obsidian talon with a threadbare cloak, my mother's tarnished pendant, and the stubborn idea that motion might keep me from cracking. Days bled into each other until time lost its edges. I learned which streams ran clear under busted ice, which roots tasted least like dirt, how to sleep beneath fallen logs when the sky snapped with black snow. Hunger pared me down to the hinge. Shame did the rest. Still, my wolf would not lie still. We kept moving. On the 5th night, or the 15th, I found a ruined shrine half-eaten by moss, its stone wolves blind with lichen. I brushed snow from the inscription. The letters were shallow, the meaning deeper, not forsaken. Tested. Then test me, I said to the cold air. The forest answered with a growl. Rogues slid from the dark like smoke-given teeth, 6, then 8, eyes alight with hunger that didn't care about law, luna, or lineage. I became a narrow thing that cut and twisted. I learned where ribs open if you're faster than fear. But numbers turn even brave math against you. A jaw found my forearm and hot pains sang, knees buckled, breath stuttered. The world fishtailed. Then the night itself growled back, low, ancient, a sound that pulled obedience from marrow. The rogues hesitated. A figure stepped from shadow wearing winter like a cloak, a man with storm-black hair, silver rings at his hands, and an aura that pressed the air flat. Alpha. More than Alpha, King. His scent was cedar smoke and first snow. The rogues fled. He crossed the drift, knelt, and touched 2 fingers to my throat. Stay, he rumbled, voice like stone warmed by sun. My vision shook to pieces as he lifted me, and in the beat before darkness closed, I saw a crescent of silver glowing on his hand, not carved, but born. Heat met me first, then the pulse of drums muffled by stone and distance. I swam back through sleep into a hall of timber and iron, fur throws piled high, the air sown with pine and foxglove. My wounds were bound neat with mountain herbs. My name sat strange on my tongue. Where am I? I rasped to the rafters. A shadow shifted. He filled the doorway the way a storm fills the horizon, inevitable and quiet. Stormcrest, he said. My territory. His eyes were pale steel, the kind that held history. Theron, he added after a beat, as if the name were a weight he didn't make others carry often. I tried to sit, pain disagreed. He moved before I finished wincing, one hand steadying my shoulder with a care that stole the word pity from the room. Drink. The tea was sharp and kind at once. Why? I asked. Rogues don't leave witnesses. No one dies on Stormcrest land, he said simply, like weather stating itself. Not while I am Alpha. The title hung there, true as gravity. My wolf pressed forward, alert, not afraid. I'm Naira, I said. He already knew. His gaze had found the ragged scar circling my throat, the ghost of a mark that never lived long enough to settle. Beta? He asked. I nodded once. Coward, he said, not unkind, and the word loosened something I'd tied too tight. Rest, Omega. His voice softened further, the dangerous edge sheathed. Strength returns to those who lend it room. When he left, the fire sighed, the mountain breathed, and a thought I refused to name set a small camp in my chest. Perhaps the moon had not erred, only redirected. Stormcrest woke early, a fortress carved from cliff and vow. Hammers rang, steel sang, wolves laughed with their teeth still wet from training. Nobody stared long, everyone measured. I liked it more than I wanted to. Theron's second, lean, dark-eyed Bale, brought me bread and a tunic that fit like a promise. The rogues have been testing our borders, he said, assessing me the way good fighters do, counting scars, not stories. You kept 4 busy on your own. 6, I corrected, and his mouth did a quick, surprised thing that might have been respect. The king wants you on your feet, he added. King? I echoed. Alpha King, Bale said, as if the mountain itself had pronounced it. Stormcrest bows to none but the moon and Theron. The words shouldn't have steadied me. They did. I wrapped my mother's pendant around my palm and stepped into the yard. Cold bit my lungs in a clean way. Theron stood at the far ring, sleeves rolled, forearms nicked with old work. When his gaze found me, silence moved through the yard like a wolf through high grass. He tossed me a wooden blade. Show me where you break, he said. So I know where to hold. We circled. He tested, I answered, he pressed, I yielded where yielding kept me whole. It wasn't gentle. It was honest. When the blade finally clattered from my hand, he didn't smile like a victor. He nodded like a builder seeing the line of a beam. Again, Naira. Breath burning, arms shaking, I picked the weapon up. Somewhere between the 2nd and 7th fall, shame quit speaking. Somewhere between the 8th and 9th, my wolf lifted her head and watched the Alpha King with an interest she had not afforded anyone since childhood. I slept that night with fire on my skin and silence in my chest, the good kind, the kind that makes room. Storm rolled through before dawn, pawing at the shutters. I woke to the drum of rain, to the realization that I wasn't thinking of Cashin first anymore. The absence frightened me less than expected. In the mess hall, steam rose from kettles and the air tasted of rosemary and iron. Bale slid a bowl my way and tilted his head toward the king's table without looking. Theron ate like he did everything, present, efficient, unshowy. We hunt the break at Blackwater Pass, he said to the room. Rogues gather there like rot. We burn it clean. His gaze flicked to me. If you ride near me. I bristled, then realized his tone wasn't ownership, it was calculus. Out on the ridge, the world narrowed to white breath and dark trees. When the first rogue lunged, Bale was already in motion. When the second feinted high, I ducked low and ripped the softer belly. When the third tried courage, Theron answered with inevitability. We fought like weather patterns finally meeting. By the time the snow lay quiet again, I was shaking from loss and gain and a cut along my shoulder that would scar into an honest story. You disobeyed my call to fall back, Theron said later, eyes steady. I read the pack line and filled a gap. I shot back. Silence, then the smallest curving of his mouth, half chastisement, half approval. Then next time, he said, stand where I can see you fill it. That night he sent salve and clean bandage and no lecture. My wolf turned in a slow, satisfied circle before lying down. I dreamed of a moon that had blinked once and reopened its eye somewhere kinder. 3 mornings later, a courier found Stormcrest through sleet so heavy it scraped. He carried a letter that wore too much gold and smelled like a memory I thought I'd already bled out. Bale brought it to the king brought it to me. The seal was obsidian Talon's Fong. Inside, ink with Cassion's tidy arrogance glinted in the firelight. By decree of Council and Beta, you are invited to witness the mating of Cassion of Obsidian Talon to Lady Vessa of Moonmere. Allies welcome. May the moon bless the union. Bless sounded a lot like bait. I read it twice, then set it down like it might stain. The old humiliation tried to stand up inside me. It didn't quite find its feet. Theron's hand, broad, scarred, warm, covered the page, covering the past. You owe them nothing, he said. We'll send the courier back with a lesson on respect. I stared at the flame for a long breath. If I don't go, the story they wrote for me wins, I said quietly. If I go, I finish the sentence myself. He studied me, Alpha weighing Alpha thing he'd never name. You'll not go alone, he said at last. No, I agreed. I won't. He didn't smile, exactly. Something like weather shifted, the pressure before first snow eased. Then we'll let them learn the difference between beta pride and a king's memory, he murmured, and my wolf, traitor and friend, wagged her quiet tail. Stormcrest dressed me not like a trophy but a truth. The seamstresses lined a traveling gown with wolf-soft fur and stitched the hem with threads the exact color of moonlight on steel. Bale buckled plates over my shoulders with the same care he gave his own harness. They will stare, he warned, amused. Let them sprain their necks, I said, and surprised myself by meaning it. At the gate, Theron waited armored, the silver rings at his hands catching dawn like glass. Ready? He asked. I have been since the night they called me less, I answered. We rode with a column of Stormcrest wolves whose silence did not hide their pleasure at an excuse to enter Obsidian Talon tall. The road spiraled through black cedar and white stone. Ravens paced us like gossip with wings. At the first sight of the fortress cut into mountainside, my stomach tightened, then loosened. The walls were smaller than memory. The guards recognized the banner too late. When the gates groaned open, the scent of oiled wood and old fear hit at once. We dismounted into silence thick enough to butter. Whispers followed like midges. Is that the rejected Omega? No, that's the Stormcrest Luna. The word Luna didn't fit my mouth yet, it fit my spine. Theron's hand brushed the small of my back, not claim, not comfort, a compass point. We crossed the courtyard where my knees had once kissed stone. I didn't look down. The hall beyond glittered, all crystal teeth and polished pride. Music tripped, stumbled, and fell quiet as we entered. I let them look. I let them count how wrong they'd been. They'd built the dais like a stage for forgiveness. Cassion stood upon it in white and iron gray, Lady Vessa at his side wearing a smile that had been sharpened to a point. The herald's voice wobbled. Presenting Alpha Theron of Stormcrest and, he faltered, eyes skimming my glowing throat. Lady Nyra, Luna chosen. The room exhaled all at once. Cassion's goblet trembled and red wine licked his knuckles. He was handsomer than the boy I'd loved and smaller than the man I needed. Nyra, he said thin and hoarse. You came. You invited me, I replied, gentle as a blade's flat. Theron stood to my right like a tall oath. Obsidian Talon thought an open hall a fine place for theater, he said pleasantly. Stormcrest appreciates performance. Shall we toast to accurate casting? Laughter fluttered, terrified and delighted. Cassion's gaze snagged on the silver crescent pulsing faintly at my throat, the living echo of a bond not yet sealed but very awake. Envy moved across his face like weather, there and gone, leaving something wrecked. You're seen, I said, and let the words sit. Chosen, Theron added mildly, and the room tasted the second meaning. I watched understanding bloom and wither in the same breath behind Cassion's eyes. That his mockery invitation had delivered a king to his table, that the Omega he'd thrown away had learned to be her own gravity, that the moon keeps receipts. Vessa's fingers tightened on his sleeve. The torches crackled like they wanted to laugh. I lifted my glass. To lessons, I said. May we all survive the ones we deserve. When music limped back into service, I found the night air and my balance in the courtyard where frost took everything honest and gave it back cleaner. Stars hung like quiet witnesses. Footsteps approached, the rhythm too familiar. "You've made your point," Cashin said, stopping at a distance that remembered where my teeth lived now. He smelled the same, cedar oil and ambition, only thinner somehow. "Was there one?" I asked. The question made him flinch. "Do you love him?" The need in his voice made something weary rather than cruel in me. "Wrong question," I said softly. "Did you ever love me?" He looked at the stones. "I loved what you could be for me," he admitted, voice a scrape. "Which is to say you loved yourself," I said, and the old ache did not rise. Behind me, Theron's presence came to stand a breath away, silent weather again. I didn't need protection. I accepted the reminder. Cashin's eyes flicked to the mark at my throat, to the clear power braided with it. "What is that?" he whispered, already knowing. I touched the glow. "Proof the moon writes new chapters when we stop begging for old ones," I said. Silence took a knee. "Go back inside," I added. "Your bride deserves a husband who is present." He nodded once, a lesson half learned, and turned. When he was gone, I finally exhaled. Theron didn't speak. He didn't need to. He merely offered his hand the way one offers daylight to a room that's done with night. The feast recovered because hungry people prefer chewing to thinking. Stormcrest wolves ate like soldiers and laughed like men who sharpen their joy as carefully as their steel. Obsidian Talon watched us as if learning a new dialect. When the hall's attention ripened, Theron rose. He didn't raise his voice. The room strained to hear him anyway. "A toast," he said, and every elder sat a little straighter. "To the moon's economy, how it takes what is thrown away and returns it tenfold to those who will carry it well." He drank, then added with almost kindness, "And to betas who discover the cost of cheap courage before it ruins a whole pack." The sound that followed was half gasp, half laughter, all honest. Cashin's jaw clenched. Vesa smiled the brittle smile of women who will count later. I didn't watch him break. I watched the Omegas lining the walls lift their chins a fraction, watched the young wolves near the doors reprise certain futures. The music remembered its legs. Bale drifted by and murmured, amused, "You set a new weather vane in this place." "No," I said. "The wind just turned." And in my chest, something uncoiled that had been pretending to be rage, but was only grief learning the shape of gone. We left before dawn, because departures are truer in first light. The gates that had once slammed like a verdict opened like a shrug. No jeers followed. Only ravens and the soft rush of breath from wolves who'd learned a little fear and a little respect in the same night. The road home smelled of thaw. For a while we rode without speech, reins creaking, leather talking to leather. "Quiet," Theron observed, the word gentle. "Finished," I corrected. He glanced over, measuring with the kind of attention that is itself a gift. "Do you hate him?" "No," I said, surprised to mean it. "I hate the way I made myself small to fit his story. That version of me is gone." His hand found mine where our horses paced close, a touch that was invitation rather than verdict. "Then the moon is satisfied," he said, and something like a smile, rare and real, cut through the morning. Stormcrest rose out of cloud like a promise kept. When we passed the bannered gate, a howl went up, not the hungry kind, the home one. I didn't fight the heat behind my eyes. Bale shouted some ungentle welcome about me finally looking like I belonged to my own bones. I laughed for the first time in a year, and it didn't sound like breaking. They called me Luna before the bond was sealed, the way a road takes your weight before you stamp it flat. I resisted the word because I had learned the cost of titles given too early. I accepted the work. I trained until my bruises looked like constellations. I learned the names of every pup in the lower yard and the old stories that kept the mountain from forgetting itself. When winter bit down harder, Stormcrest lit 100 lanterns and painted a circle in ash and salt. The blood moon climbed, fat and watchful. Theron stood within the ring bare to the cold, scars reading like a map of where he'd refused to yield. "This is a vow, not a crown," he said quietly, "for me alone. Walk away if the word king tastes like iron." I stepped forward, slow, certain. I'm not here for a crown, I answered. I'm here for the work and the warmth. His eyes softened in a way only the mountain would ever get to keep. When his teeth broke my skin, pain flowered and then became heat, became music, became the opposite of alone. The crescent at his hand flared, the light at my throat answered. Wolves howled so loud the peaks threw it back twice. When the glow settled and breath returned, I stood taller than history, Omega, Alpha's mate, queen without needing the word. The past did not vanish, it simply lost its teeth. And over the ring, the moon approved with a thin, bright smile. Morning after the blood moon arrived soft as wool. Stormcrest woke careful, as if not to step on something newly hatched. I wore the ache of the bond like sunlight beneath skin, warm where it had burned, steady where it had seared. The wolves bowed not to my title but to the work they hoped I'd do. Good. Bale met me on the training yard with 2 staffs and a grin that would bruise if you let it. Luna, he said. Prove the word. We fought until breath came ragged and the staff's bark bit my palms. When I finally caught his ankle and put him on the snow, he laughed from his back, proud as if the mountain itself had tripped him. After, the lower dens opened like pages. I listened more than I spoke, to a mother whose pup's shift hurt his bones, to a smith whose son wanted books instead of blades, to the quiet rage of Omegas who had learned to fold themselves small to fit a Beta's hallways. Unfold, I told them, simple as steam. There's room here. At dusk a horn sounded, 3 long notes that meant message and trouble married each other. Theron broke the seal in the war room while lanterns threw maps into mountains and rivers into veins. High conclave and 7 knights, he read. Kings and betas, councils and blades. Topic: rogue surge, border fires, violated accords. He looked up at me. And a footnote from Obsidian Talon, Bale added, squinting. Request for arbitration over reputation injury. My laugh came out like a blade shine. Cashin wants the conclave to fix what his mouth broke. Theron's gaze held mine, weighing heat and history. We go, he said. Not to answer him. To set the wind? The map crackled under his hand. My wolf rose to her feet and faced the road. Preparation felt like prayer you could hold. We read old accords until the parchment smelled of our hands. We marked the places on the map where the rogue surge moved like disease seeking warm blood. I walked the cliff path at dawn, speaking to the mountain. Lend us steadiness, lend us echo, make our nose sound like stone. Theron joined without words, pacing beside me until the last star winked and day took the shift. You're angry, he observed, not asking. No, I said, tasting the truth. I'm precise. He nodded once, satisfied. Keep that. On the 3rd day a delegation limped up the switchback, Moonmere cloaks torn, eyes wide with hunger and fear. Vesa stood among them, crown gone, frost in her hair. Cashin sent us away when rogues breached the north pens, she said, voice raw. Said the conclave would solve it, and wanted the hall clean of panic. Rage licked my tongue. I did not swallow it, I set it down beside me where I could see it. You're safe here, I told her. The words tasted like closure salted with mercy. Theron gave orders that moved like a river, beds, broth, watchers, warding fires banked and high. Later, when the hall slept, Vesa approached again, smaller without the idea of a throne. He isn't only cruel, she said, eyes wet with something she hated. He's afraid. Fear and cruelty shake hands often, I answered. One day he'll choose which to keep. She studied me as if hunting for the wound and finding only a scar that told time. Did you forgive him? I thought of the courtyard, the toast, the way the room learned a new shape for power. I forgave myself, I said. He's got his own work. Outside, snow began in earnest, covering tracks with absolution. We left for the conclave under a sky the color of a blade's back. Stormcrest traveled like a poem with a strict meter, scouts first, then standards, then the king and Luna, then supply, then the rear wolves who preferred trouble to boredom. The conclave fortress sat where 3 ranges knotted themselves into law. Banners of a dozen packs flamed from its teeth. Inside, the hall ran long as an oath and twice as old. Kings sat along the spine, betas beneath, councils crowding like bramble. Obsidian Talon's table glittered with money turned into apology too late. Cashin looked thinner, gold dulled by sleeplessness. He didn't meet my eyes. Good. He was learning where not to look. The High Speaker struck stone with bone. Ancient ceremony, newer troubles. Reports spilled, farms torched, pups snatched, hunters dragged past borders, rogue packs refusing parley as if something behind them would bite worse. When it was Stormcrest's turn, Theron stood without theatrics and set our maps on the council slab. "This is pattern, not accident," he said. "Rogues don't gather unless herded." Murmured denial, fear all took their swing. Herded by who? An elder sneered, used to thinking his walls meant safety. I put a marker where the surge teeth had nibbled 3 realms at once. Not who, I said. What? Something that eats memory. Packs forgetting who they are crack easy. The room shifted, uneasy with metaphors that dared be true. Cashin cleared his throat. Stormcrest arrived with personal grievances. He began. Theron didn't bother to blink. Kings don't carry personal in here, he said mildly. Only pack. The High Speaker's mouth twitched as if saving a laugh for later. Business resumed, heavier and cleaner. Before dusk, outriders stumbled through the doors, breath like knives. They come. One gasped. Not rogues, wolves with their eyes turned inside out. War arrived impolite, kicking the doors out of courtesy. The fortress shuddered to readiness, horns, boots, arrows hissing like rain. We spilled onto the eastern terrace where the mountain fell away into a stare of killing ground. Below, a mass moved like rot-wearing fur, wolves in no colors, eyes blind to kin, jaws working as if chewing through a command only they could hear. Not rogues, driven. A wind carried a scent I didn't know, cold ash and churchyard. What herds them? Baal asked, then answered himself when the first shadow lifted from the tree-line. A thing that looked like a wolf only if you don't know wolves, stretched wrong, threaded with night where muscles should sit. My wolf didn't growl, she hissed. Night hunger. An elder whispered, and dread clattered through the line. Old story, new bones. Keep formation, Theron said, low and sure. Break the string and the beads stop rolling. We met the first wave at the lower braces. My blade learned a new language, one that required cutting the dark inside a body rather than the body itself. The night hunger shrieked without sound you could hear, your ribs felt it instead. Kings fought shoulder to shoulder, truth trims hierarchy neat. Cashin was there, face bloodless, form correct and soul late. Once he slipped, once I caught him by the scruff as if memory had reached out a hand. By the time the third wave hit, I learned their ugly secret, turned 2 wolves against each other, and the shadow fed on the start of betrayal like wine. Hold! I shouted until my throat tore. Look at me, not at fear. They did. We held. When the thing that pretended to be a wolf finally broke under Theron's jaws, the hillside sighed, and whatever drove the not rogues snapped like a rotten rope. Silence fell, heavy and grateful. Snow began, as if the sky remembered how to cover the dead. We slept in pieces that night, dreams stitched with teeth. Morning dragged its feet. The High Speaker's hall smelled of smoke and iron and the stale breath of men who met the edge and survived. Night hunger, he said, tasting the old word like a thorn. We banished them to folktale. Stories are where monsters rest while they sharpen, I answered. The old wolf's eyes found me. Stormcrest Luna, you speak like a hunter and a teacher. I thought of Omega's line like shadows along Obsidian Talon's walls. I've been both. Cashin stood, palms open in a gesture that begged without kneeling. I, Obsidian Talon, request instruction, he said, choosing each word like it might cut him. Our Omegas. He swallowed pride and something softer. They're afraid. Teach them to be seen, I said. Or they'll be easy for the dark thing that eats the unseen. Murmurs, some approving, some offended by the suggestion that Omegas were not furniture. Theron unrolled a plan while counselors flinched at its simplicity, shared patrol grids, bonfires at lake crossings, mixed pack teams so old grudges couldn't breed blind spots, and messaging codes carried by pups who knew how to run and not boast. "We do this together or not at all," he finished. "Night like separated meat." Laughter broke the room's spine just enough to stand straight again. When we adjourned, Cashin caught me at the door, looking like a boy who'd found a cliff and wanted to jump cleanly. "I wronged you," he said. "Not just you, everyone who watched and learned the wrong lesson." I let silence be the teacher. "Fix it," I said finally. "Start with your omegas. Start with Vesa. Start where it hurts." He nodded, small and true. It would never give me back what I'd given. It could give them a future that didn't smell like ash. That was enough for the hour. The conclave didn't end so much as change employment. We turned a hall built for boasting into a war room fit for weaving. Stormcrest took the northern routes. Moonmere the passes with voices. Obsidian Talon, to their credit, volunteered for the dirtiest work, the kennels and kitchens and low roads where night hunger would find appetites easier. I ran drills with whoever showed up, pups with knobby knees, elders with hands like rope, omegas who had learned to fight with silence. We taught them the flame line, salt and ash, breath and chant, and the mirror rule, never look into a night hunger's mouth because it will show you the worse you are and ask you to agree. At dusk, I sat on the terrace steps and learned to breathe in a body that had stopped bracing. Theron joined, passing me a cup that steamed herbs and smoke. "You took the room," he said. "No," I said. "I set a table. They Saturday." He considered that as if I'd given him a new tool. "You will make a ruin of the old ways that deserve ruin," he said at last, almost smiling. "And build a better wall where the wind gets in." I looked at our hands, nicked, warm, unclean, honest. "I don't want a crown," I told him again, in case the world forgot. "I want a marrow deep home." "You have it," he said, as if offering bread. Later, under blankets that remembered the blood moon, I listened to his breathing and understood a thing I'd been carefully not naming. I loved him, not as rescue, not as remedy, but as right weather. We returned to Stormcrest with half the conclave's plans stitched under our ribs. The fortress received us with drums and soup and the good noise of people who kept living. I walked the wards with Bale, touching salt lines, speaking names. Names anchor things. The dark doesn't like anchored prey. The pups practiced the chant that makes your spine remember it's a mast. In the lower den, Vesa started a reading circle of omegas and warriors who never learned letters because nobody expected them to need contracts. I kissed her cheek and meant it. News ran on quick feet. Obsidian Talon had opened their great hall for meal sharing, had taken down the dais 2 steps and built a ramp for old bones, had given the kitchen keys to an omega named Kara whose hands could make grief eatable. Cashin wrote once, a short letter with no perfume, just ink. "We are learning. Thank you for beginning where I should have." I folded it, and put it under a stone on the cliff path where things go to be witnessed by weather. That night, a watchman's horn tore the sky. We reached the east wall tall and ready to find a night hunger siege and found instead a single figure at the tree line, shoulders like a question. He stepped into the torchlight with hands raised. Ash smeared his cheeks, moonlight caught on a ragged crescent around his wrist. "I broke from them," he said, voice wrecked. "They don't think anymore. They eat remembering." Bale's blade didn't drop. Mine did a fraction. "Name?" I asked. "Cain," he said. "Once of Frostwater. I carried their hunger until it choked me. I smelled truth and loss and the first wet breath of a man who wants to come back to himself." "Let him in," I said. "Feed him. Then we'll decide where to put his shadow." Cain's story came in shards, as if he'd swallowed glass and now spat it clean. The night hunger hadn't risen, they'd been raised, from wolves who had let their emptiest voices run the house. A whisper moved among them, promising an empire where rank lived at the blade's tip and omegas never spoke unless to beg. "He wears no mark," Cain said, staring into his broth as if it might reply. "He smells like nothing, a hole where a scent should be." The room cooled. The thing behind the thing had a face now, not hunger, but erasure. Where? Theron asked. A valley with no birds, Kane said. Frost that doesn't melt on tongues. Maps knew the place, but old stories wouldn't say it. The Forgetting Hollow, Bale murmured, and everyone's teeth set at once. We could wait for the next surge and make a better defense, or we could go into the mouth and teach it to starve. We go, I said, before caution could dress as wisdom. Theron didn't argue. He smiled the smile he saves for when I say the thing he was going to say. Light teams, he decided. No drums. Salt, fire, rope, names. And a story to tell ourselves when the dark shows us a prettier lie. I wrote that story on the inside of my wrists in ash. You are Naira. You are Luna by vow and work. You belong to yourself and to Stormcrest and to the moon that keeps receipts. At dawn, we crossed the threshold where birds forget how to sing and even our breath sounded like it wanted to leave us. Stay where I can see you, Theron said quietly, not command, not plea, compass. I will, I answered. The hollow opened like a mouth that had been waiting a very long time. My wolf stood up, squared her shoulders, and smiled with all her teeth. The hollow swallowed light without chewing. Every step forward took a small piece of memory, a whisper of who we were. I tied my name around my wrist again and again until it became a pulse louder than the silence. Behind me, the pack moved as one shadow, the glow of salt lanterns barely licking the mist. The air tasted wrong, flat, like breath held too long. Then the wind stopped, and the whisperer appeared. Not man, not wolf, not thing you could name cleanly. He looked unfinished, edges blurred by the dark, eyes like holes where moons went to die. You built new strength from old wounds, he said, voice soft enough to crawl inside your head. Let me unmake it for you. I raised my blade. You don't unmake what was chosen twice, I said, steady despite the trembling earth. Theron moved beside me, silver light crawling up his arms, every scar on his skin alive. You feed on what's forgotten, he said. We remember. Then the hollow screamed, and the ground opened like lungs gasping. The night hunger poured out, a tide of shadow wearing stolen fur. We met them in the half-light, salt hissing, fire roaring. My wolf surged, teeth bared, voice a hymn. When the whisperer reached for me, I let him touch only the scar Cashin gave me, let him taste the shame that turned into crown. He recoiled, hissed, and the darkness around him cracked. What have you done? He howled. Named myself, I said, driving the blade through his echo. The hollow buckled, mountains groaning. Now remember this. When the world stopped shaking, the hollow was no longer a wound, it was a scar, sealed, silver-veined, humming faintly with what we'd left behind. Snow fell for the first time there in generations. We climbed out exhausted, half believing we were ghosts until the sky split with morning. Bale laughed, raw and startled. Theron stood quiet, his breath steaming in rhythm with mine. It's over, I whispered, though part of me knew peace is never a finish line. No, he said gently. It's beginning. We carried Kane on a litter of branches. He'd fallen in the last surge, smiling like a man forgiven by his own bones. The journey back to Stormcrest felt shorter, lighter, as if the mountain leaned down to meet us halfway. Wolves howled from every ridge, echoing the news faster than messengers could ride. The hollow had fallen, the whisperer was gone, and the moon had turned her face toward us again. At the gates, torches blazed bright, children scattering petals of crushed frost bloom. Someone began to sing, the old song for the living, and others joined until the courtyard trembled. Theron looked at me over the sound, his eyes silver fire and soft thunder. You ended a curse, he said. No, I corrected, smiling through tears. We rewrote it. That night, the moon hung low and golden, fat with satisfaction. I lay awake beside him, fingers tracing the scar on his chest, feeling it pulse faintly with mine. The mountains slept, the wolves dreamed, and for the first time since exile, my heart beat without armor. The moon had chosen right twice. The next weeks passed in quiet repair. Stormcrest healed like a living thing, slow, deliberate, grateful. Wolves rebuilt the eastern wall with hands that had learned the price of standing. pups carried water and laughed when the buckets sloshed over. We buried the fallen on the ridge where dawn first touches the snow, each grave marked not with stone but with a carved token of the moon. I kept Cain's beside mine, a promise that even those who walked too long in shadow could find the light again. The hollow no longer bled into our dreams, but the silence it left behind hummed with new weight. One morning, Baal found me at the overlook. "They're calling you the moon's steel," he said, smirking. "Sounds heavier than Luna." I shook my head. "Names are wind. What matters is the echo they leave." He leaned on the railing. "Echoes loud. Even obsidian Talon hears it." My heart flickered, not with longing, but with a strange peace. "Let them. Maybe it will teach them something." He tilted his head. "Like humility? Like the shape of a spine," I said. That night, when the drums called the pack together, Theron lifted a silver cup carved with runes. "Tonight we honor the living," he said, voice carrying through the stone. "We have learned the difference between surviving and returning." He looked at me then, a private warmth hiding under command. "To the one who reminded us." The wolves howled my name, not in worship, but in witness. For the first time, I let the sound wash through me without shrinking. The moon above tilted her face, bright and proud. As spring pried winter's fingers from the cliffs, the world below began to thaw into rumor and trade again. Messengers brought tidings from distant packs, alliances reforged, old grudges softened by shared scars. Even Obsidian Talon sent envoys bearing pelts and salt as apology. Vessa led them herself. She looked stronger, not gilded anymore but grounded, the way trees are after storms. "We come not to seek forgiveness," she said before the court, "but to learn how you built what we nearly destroyed." Theron welcomed them with the grace of a man who understood power didn't need to shout. I offered her my hand, she took it. Later, in the courtyard where we once fought for our names, she whispered, "He's changed, Naira." Slowly, painfully. "He's unlearning what the crown taught him." I nodded. "That's good. Some men take lifetimes." She smiled, tired but real. "And you? Still learning to rest without waiting for war." The wind stirred her hair, silver catching gold. "You deserve the quiet," she said. I watched her leave at dusk, her wolves carrying the banner of a pack that had finally remembered its own heart. When I returned inside, Theron stood by the fire, reading an old scroll of lunar laws. "You let them in," he said. "So did you," I replied. "Because strength hoarded is rot." He closed the scroll, expression unreadable but his voice soft. "You've turned this fortress into something holy, Naira." I smiled faintly. "No. Just human." His hand found mine, steady and warm. "Same thing," he murmured. Outside, the mountain breathed, and for once, nothing hunted. Summer at Stormcrest came in colors the north had forgotten it owned. Wildflowers split the frost and spilled down the slopes like spilled paint. Wolves who once walked with their heads low now ran through the meadows with laughter biting the air. The pups who'd known only battle games now practiced herding, building, weaving. I spent my mornings at the training yard, not to fight, but to teach rhythm, the dance between control and freedom. "You win when your fear learns your steps," I told them. Some days Theron watched from the ramparts, arms crossed, amusement flickering like sunlight on steel. "You've tamed them," he teased once. "No," I said, wiping sweat from my neck. "I've reminded them they were never beasts." At night, when the moon stretched thin and low, he would find me in the library, surrounded by maps of lands I'd never see. "Thinking of leaving?" he'd ask, half smile beneath the question. "Thinking of where stories go when we stop telling them," I'd answer. He'd pull me close then, grounding me with warmth and heartbeat. "They don't go," he'd say against my hair. "They stay and grow teeth." Sometimes we didn't speak at all, just breathed in the rhythm of wolves who had survived too much to waste words. The mark at my neck pulsed with quiet strength, not as claim, but as reminder. The moonlight through the window glinted silver, resting on us like approval. I realized then that love wasn't the blaze I'd once begged for. It was the fire that refused to go out even after the battle was over. By autumn, travelers began to arrive at Stormcrest not out of fear, but faith. Rogues seeking redemption, broken packs hunting purpose, lone wolves tired of silence. They came carrying stories instead of swords. We built a hall for them, lined with stone and warmth, where their tales could live beside ours. I called it the Sanctuary of Names. Every wolf has 2 deaths, I said during its consecration. When their heart stops, and when their story does, we'll keep the second from happening. The idea spread like wildfire wrapped in kindness. Even distant realms sent their scribes to record the new songs of unity. One evening, an elder approached me, a frail woman with eyes like river stones. "You have made the moon proud," she whispered, placing a charm in my palm. It was small, silver, shaped like an unbroken circle. "This belonged to the first Luna," she said. She, too, believed stories keep kingdoms alive. I bowed my head, humbled beyond speech. Later that night, I found Theron by the watchtower, staring into the horizon. "You built more than walls," he said softly. "You built memory." I looked at the charm in my hand. Memory's just the moon's way of saying it still sees us. He smiled faintly. "Then may she never blink." The wind carried his words through the valley, and somewhere far below, I swore I heard new voices rising in song, wolves who had once been enemies now howling together beneath one endless sky. The moon hung high, round and unguarded, watching her children remember how to be whole. Winter returned softer this time, gentler, as if even the cold had learned mercy. Snow gathered along the rooftops of Stormcrest, muffling the fortress in quiet peace. I stood on the balcony, wrapped in a fur cloak, watching lanterns glow across the valley like fallen stars. The pack was safe. The hollow sealed. The stories written. Every scar I carried had turned into scripture beneath the moonlight. Theron joined me, his steps silent, his warmth a gravity I'd come to depend on. "Do you ever wonder," I asked, "what the moon will ask of us next?" He smiled, the rare kind that reached his eyes. "She'll ask us to rest, Naira, and to keep the light lit for whoever wanders next." Below, the wolves began to gather, hundreds of them, forming a great silver circle in the snow. Baal lifted a horn, its note rising like dawn. Then came the sound, a single howl that split the night and multiplied until the mountains trembled with it. I lifted my head and joined them, my voice woven into theirs, into Theron's, into the heartbeat of every soul that refused to break. The wind carried it far beyond Stormcrest, past forests, past ruins, past the memory of pain. When the echoes faded, silence fell, the kind of silence that means everything is right. Theron's hand found mine. "The moon writes again," he murmured. I looked up. She hung full and golden above us, no longer distant, no longer testing, just watching, proud. And for the first time, I didn't feel like her chosen or her test. I felt like her equal. So ended the tale of the Omega who was cast aside and crowned by her own courage. Not as legend, not as prophecy, but as truth. The wolves of Stormcrest howled once more, and the mountain answered with peace.